This is the story of how six friends became the biggest voice of a generation. It's a story of insane highs and absolutely devastating lows. And now, 7 years after the music stopped, it's the story of a controversial rebirth that asks one question: how does a legacy survive after its heart has been completely ripped out? This is the complete saga of Linkin Park. To understand how insane that question is, you have to know just how massive their impact was. Linkin Park wasn't just another band. They were one of the best-selling musical acts of the entire 21st century, a multi-Grammy winning machine that permanently changed the music industry. They didn't just play in one genre, they smashed multiple genres together and created something that had never been heard before. By fusing metal, hip-hop, industrial, and electronica, they built a sound that was aggressive and vulnerable, chaotic, and unbelievably catchy. Their music became the anthem for an entire generation of outsiders and a lifeline for anyone fighting anxiety, depression, and anger. It was a raw, unfiltered scream in a world that always told you to be quiet. Their story is one of crazy success, but it's also one of deep personal struggles, insane resilience, and a tragedy that shook the entire world. And now, with a new singer and a new chapter, their story is still being written, forcing everyone to decide what it really means to carry on. Our story starts not in a giant stadium, but in a garage in Agoura Hills, California, all the way back in 1996. Three high school friends, Mike Shindoa, who was a rapper and an artist, Brad Delson, a guitar player, and Rob Borden, a drummer, decided to start a band. Mike and Brad had jammed in Mike's bedroom, which he kind of converted into a tiny studio. And then after graduating, they got Rob, and the first piece of the puzzle was in place. They called themselves Xero with an X. And their mission was Mike's crazy vision: to fuse every genre he loved together. He wanted the power of rock, the flow of hip-hop, and the vibe of electronic music. They added the bassist Dave Phoenix Farrell and Joe Hahn on turntables, who was studying art with Mike at the time. With their first singer, Mark Wakefield, they recorded their first demo tape. The sound was there. It was raw, but it was different. A hybrid, so to speak. But in the late 90s, different was impossible to sell. They showed their demo to every single label, and every single one of them said no. Nobody knew what to do with them. That was the problem. They weren't a rock band, and they weren't a rap group. The rejection was brutal, though. Mark Wakefield saw the writing on the wall, and he decided to leave the band. The band was about to give up. They had the sound, but no singer. An A&R guy named Jeff Blue believed in them, but he knew they were missing the final piece: a singer who could deliver these beautiful melodies and also unleash a primal scream. His search led him to a young guy in Phoenix, Arizona, fronting a local band called Gray Days. His name was Chester Bennington. Chester was a man of complete opposites. He was a quiet and shy person off stage, but he had a voice that was an absolute force of nature, a voice forged from a childhood full of pain and trauma. He could switch from a soulful whisper to a throat-shredding scream in a single breath. Jeff Blue sent Chester an instrumental and told him to record over it. The story is now legendary. Chester was celebrating his 23rd birthday, and he literally ditched his own party, went to a studio, and poured every ounce of his soul into that recording. He then played the demo for the band over the phone. The reaction was immediate. This was the voice they had been searching for. Mike Shindoa said hearing Chester's voice for the first time was an overwhelming, oh my God moment. He was the final piece of the puzzle. The band flew Chester to California for an audition, and the chemistry was electric. He was in. With Chester, the band's energy completely changed. They weren't Xero anymore. For a minute, they called themselves Hybrid Theory, a perfect name for their sound. But because of a legal issue, they had to change it again. Chester suggested a play on Santa Monica's Linkin Park. To get the website domain, they changed it to Linkin Park, Linkin, instead of the Lincoln, like Abraham Lincoln. With a new name, a new singer, and a new fire, they recorded new demos. This time, when Jeff Blue, now at Warner Brothers Records, played it for the label, the answer was finally yes. And after years of rejection, Linkin Park finally had their record deal. Now, the real work was about to begin. On October 24th, 2000, Linkin Park released their debut album, Hybrid Theory. It wasn't an overnight explosion. It was a fire that would engulf an entire generation. The first single, One Step Closer, was a mission statement. From the opening scratch to Chester's iconic screamed bridge, "Shut up when I'm talking to you," it was a shout of frustration that connected with millions of kids who felt ignored. The album was a monster. Crawling, a song about Chester's own feelings of helplessness, won them their first ever Grammy. Its raw pain showed the world they were more than just a loud rock band. Then came Paper Cut, a paranoid anthem that perfectly showed off the dynamic between Mike's raps and Chester's soaring vocals. But it was the fourth single that made them a global phenomenon. In the end, the song was the perfect storm of pop hooks and rock angst. Mike's verses set the stage, and Chester's unforgettable, explosive chorus delivered the knockout blow. The song was everywhere. It was all over the radio. It was on permanent loop on MTV, and it became the anthem for an entire generation. Hybrid Theory wasn't just an album. It was a cultural landmark. It sold over 4.8 million copies in its first year alone and was eventually certified diamond for selling over 12 million copies in the US. It was the best-selling album of 2001 and is still one of the biggest debut albums of all time. For millions of kids, Linkin Park was their band. They gave a voice to the unspoken struggles of their listeners. The world was theirs, but how do you follow up one of the biggest debut albums ever? Their answer was Meteora. Released in March 2003, Meteora didn't change the formula. It perfected it. The band took everything from Hybrid Theory and cranked it up to 11. It was bigger, cleaner, and even more powerful. The album shot to #1 on the Billboard 200. The hits just kept coming. Somewhere I Belong was a massive rock radio hit that connected with their huge fan base. And then there was Numb, built around a haunting keyboard riff and one of Chester's most legendary vocal performances. The song became one of their defining tracks. It was the ultimate anthem about the pressure to be someone you're not. Breaking the Habit, a song Mike Shindoa had worked on for years, was another insane track with its own frantic energy and stunning anime music video. Linkin Park was now officially one of the biggest bands in the world. They launched their own crazy successful tour, Project Revolution, and headlined every festival imaginable. But they weren't done. In 2004, they did something absolutely insane, a collaboration with hip-hop legend Jay-Z. The result was the EP Collision Course, and it was a landmark moment. This wasn't just a remix, it was a true fusion of two of music's biggest forces. The lead single, Numb/Encore, was a worldwide smash and even won a Grammy. It was the ultimate proof of their hybrid theory. They had brought rock and hip hop together on the world's biggest stage. They were on top of the world. But for a band that was always changing, standing still was not an option either. After the insane success of Meteora and Collision Course, the band was on top of the world. So they decided to take a massive risk. They had literally defined the sound of nu metal for a generation, and now they wanted to destroy the very box they had built. They hired legendary producer Rick Rubin, who had worked with everyone from Johnny Cash to the Beastie Boys, to help them tear it all down. The result was 2007's Minute to Midnight. The album was a sharp, deliberate turn away from their signature sound. The nu metal was gone. Instead, you had more traditional songs, insane guitar solos from Brad Delson, and a new political fire. The first single, What I've Done, was a stadium-sized rock anthem that announced the change to the world. Its epic sound was so big it was used in the first Transformers movie, which shot it straight into the stratosphere. But elsewhere, the band was experimenting. Hands Held High had Mike rapping over a simple organ track, taking aim at the government. Songs like Leave Out All the Rest and Shadow of the Day were full-on rock ballads. The change was jarring for some fans, no doubt. But Minutes to Midnight proved that Linkin Park could evolve and still be massive. It debuted at number 1 and became one of the best-selling albums of the year. If Minutes to Midnight was a step away from their past, their next album, 2010's 1,000 Suns, was a giant leap into the unknown. This was Linkin Park at their most experimental ever. It was a crazy concept album about nuclear war that played like one continuous soundscape. It was full of electronic textures and distorted vocals, and Mike Shindoa sang a lot more on this one. Tracks like The Catalyst and Waiting for the End were musically complex, blending industrial noise with huge choruses. The album split everyone down the middle, though. Critics praised it, but a lot of fans felt left behind. It was their worst-selling album at the time, but for many, it's a favorite because of its pure creative bravery. They took crazy, massive risks on this album. After their most experimental album, the band tried to find a new balance. Their next record, 2012's Living Things, was what they called a recalibration. They tried to bring every era of their sounds together. The album had the energy of their early stuff, but with the experimental vibe of 1,000 Suns. Songs like Burn It Down and Lost in the Echo felt both classic and new at the same time. Just when you thought you had them figured out, though, they swerved again. By 2014, Mike Shindoa was fed up with the soft rock on the radio. His solution? Make the most aggressive album of their career. The Hunting Party was a raw, back-to-basics rock record. The band produced it themselves to make it sound live and unpolished. The first single, Guilty All the Same, even featured rap legend Ramkin and a minute-long guitar solo, which was practically unheard of at that time. This entire period, from 2007 to 2016, proved Linkin Park was a band that refused to stand still. They were sonic chameleons, constantly changing and challenging what people expected of them. All right, quick pause. If you think this journey is as crazy as I do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. It's the only way to make sure you don't miss what's coming next, because I'm making things even about to get crazier on some of the newer videos as well. After the aggression of the Hunting Party, nobody knew what to expect from the band. What came next was the band's most shocking left turn ever. Their 7th album, 2017's One More Light, was a full-on dive into mainstream pop. They worked with pop songwriters, and the result was a sound with almost no heavy guitars or screams. The lead single, Heavy, was a polished pop duet featuring the singer Xero. The guitars were gone, replaced by electronic beats. For a huge part of the fan base, this was too much. The internet was flooded with cries of selling out, and they were just upset. The backlash was fierce, and it clearly got to the band, especially Chester. In a now infamous interview, he fired back at the critics with pure anger, telling them to move the F on. Looking back, his reaction is absolutely heartbreaking. One More Light was by far the band's most personal and lyrically raw album. Chester wasn't just singing pop songs. He was using a new language to talk about his pain more directly than ever before. The lyrics of Heavy said it all. I'm holding on. Why is everything so heavy? I'm holding on to so much more than I can carry. So the album's title track, One More Light, was written about the death of a friend. A beautiful, somber ballad about loss. Nobody knew how tragically prophetic those words would become. The argument over the album's sound completely overshadowed, though, the raw, painful honesty of what Chester was trying to say. He was pouring his heart out, singing about his lifelong battles with depression and addiction. He was telling the world he was struggling, but too many people were busy arguing about what genre to actually hear him. On July 20th, 2017, the news broke, and it was devastating. Chester Bennington was gone. He had died by suicide at his home in California. He was 41 years old. The shock was immediate and immense. A wave of disbelief and grief washed over the music world and millions of fans. The band had just released a music video for their song Talking to Myself that same morning. They were supposed to start their US tour in 1 week. The tour was instantly canceled. The band, his family, and the world were thrown into mourning. For fans, the loss felt deeply personal. Chester wasn't just a rock star. He was a voice for the voiceless. His lyrics were a safe space for people who felt alone. His screams were a release for a generation that didn't know how to scream for themselves. He made it okay to not be okay. And now, the man who had saved so many couldn't be saved himself. The band's statements were gut-wrenching. Mike Shindoa tweeted he was shocked and heartbroken. A few days later, the band released a statement writing, "The demons who took you from us were always part of the deal. After all, it was the way you sang about those demons that made everyone fall in love with you in the first place." On October 27th, 2017, the surviving members of Linkin Park took the stage at the Hollywood Bowl for a 3-hour tribute. It was an intensely emotional night, with guests ranging from Blink-182 to System of a Down, Avenged Sevenfold, and so many more. But the most powerful moment came when Mike Shindoa sat at a piano to perform in the end. He rapped his verses, but when the chorus hit, a single spotlight lit up an empty microphone at center stage. And in that moment, thousands of fans sang Chester's part, their voices filling the entire arena. It was an overwhelming moment of shared grief, a heartbreaking and beautiful tribute to the voice that was gone. After the concert, the band went on an indefinite hiatus. The future was a total blank. And one question hung in the air. Is this the end of Linkin Park? For years after Chester's death, there was a profound silence. The 5 surviving members retreated to deal with their grief. The first voice to emerge was Mike Shindoa's. In 2018, he released a solo album called Post Traumatic. It was a raw, real-time diary of his journey through grief. It was brave, vulnerable, and a necessary step for him and for the fans. Meanwhile, the other members focused on their families. It was later revealed that drummer Rob Borden was stepping away from the band, needing distance from the trauma of losing Chester. For years, Linkin Park as a band was basically gone. Except for the anniversary releases of Hybrid Theory and Meteora, they were just chapters from the past. The question of the band's future was an explosive topic for fans. For many, Linkin Park without Chester. I'd say so for many, Linkin Park without Chester was just wrong. His voice was so tied to the band's DNA that continuing felt like a betrayal. To them, he was irreplaceable. But others felt the spirit of Linkin Park, led by Mike Shindoa, had to continue. They argued the best way to honor Chester's legacy was to carry the music forward. For 7 long years, this was just a hypothetical debate. Then, in the late summer of 2024, the silence finally broke. It started with a cryptic countdown. A mysterious website appeared with a 100-hour timer. The band's social media, quiet for years, was wiped clean and replaced with a new logo. The internet exploded. Was this another box set? Or was it the one thing so many had hoped for and so many others had dreaded? On September 5th, 2024, the timer hit 0. Mike Shindoa, Brad Delson, and Dave Farrell walked onto a stage and confirmed the news to the world. Linkin Park was back. They announced they were starting a new chapter. They introduced 2 new members, Colin Brittain on drums, and stepping into the impossibly large shoes of co-lead vocalist was Emily Armstrong, the frontwoman of the band Dead Sarah. They also announced that while Brad Delson was still a core member, he wouldn't be touring. And of course, Joe Hahn remained on turntables. The announcement was massive. Not only were they back, but they had a new album, From Xero, and a giant world tour planned. The first run was a 9-date arena tour across 4 continents, with an even bigger tour announced for 2025. The fan reaction was a total wave. I will say, not even a total wave. It was a tidal wave of emotion. Biggest wave you can imagine. There was pure joy. There was also cautious optimism. And there was real anger from those who felt this was a desecration of Chester's legacy. Emily Armstrong especially was put in an impossible spot. Personally, I would not want to be in that spot because that is super hard probably to deal with. You have to step into somebody else's shoes who's been the front person of a band. That is not a place you want to be. And the new chapter hit its first major controversy almost immediately. Internet detectives found old photos of Emily Armstrong at an event tied to the Church of Scientology, and a social media comment where she seemed to support actor Danny Masterson, a convicted felon. For a fan base built on overcoming trauma, the association now really felt like a betrayal. A few days later, Armstrong released a public statement. She clarified she was not and had never been a Scientologist. She explained she had gone to the event years ago to support a friend's art therapy, not knowing the organization's other ties. Most importantly, she condemned Danny Masterson's horrific crimes, voiced her support for the victims, and apologized for the pain she had caused. With the controversy addressed, the focus shifted back to the one thing that mattered, the music. They dropped their first single, The Emptiness Machine. It was a powerful mix of classic Linkin Park and new energy. Mike's familiar raps were there. The heavy riffs were there, and then the chorus hit, and the world heard Emily Armstrong's voice in Linkin Park. It was powerful and melodic, honoring the past without trying to copy it. On November 15th, 2024, the album From Xero was released. Led by singles like The Emptiness Machine, Heavy as the Crown, Over Each Other, and Two-Faced, it was a critical and commercial success, topping charts worldwide. More importantly, it was a deliberate callback to the band's roots, wrestling with the very questions the fans were asking. How do you start over while honoring what came before? The story of Linkin Park has always been about evolution, though. From a garage in California, they built an empire of sound that defined a generation. They blended genres nobody thought went together, and in doing so, they made a place for millions of people who felt like they didn't belong. They hit the highest of highs, becoming one of the biggest bands on the planet. And they survived the lowest low, a tragedy that threatened to end them forever. Chester Bennington's legacy is immortal. The power in his voice and the honesty in his lyrics can never be replaced or rewritten. They can't. This new chapter doesn't change that. It's built on the foundation he actually helped create. The story of Linkin Park is no longer just about a tragic ending. It's now a story of a new beginning. It's about resilience and the guts to rebuild after an unimaginable loss. But it forces us, the fans, to decide what that legacy means now. Is it a memory to be perfectly preserved in a museum? Or is it a living, breathing thing, something that's allowed to change, to grow, and even to start again from zero? But now I want to know what you think. The conversation is just getting started, and I'm letting you decide our next Linkin Park video. We have two options: a deep dive celebrating the Chester Bennington era, or a full analysis of the new Emily Armstrong era and the From Xero album. Vote in the comments right now. Which one would you want to see? Your feedback literally decides the next video on this channel. Thanks for watching.